And now it is my pleasure to introduce the moderator for today's session, Chase Brunson. Chase has been in the events industry for 10 years, holding positions as an association planner, managing events in the nonprofit sector, a convention services manager, and a wedding planner in Texas through his company Big Reputation Events. He is passionate about volunteering, serving as director of marketing for the Texas Hill Country chapter of Meeting Professionals International, and as a board member for the LGBT Meeting Professionals Association. As a proudly out and visible trans man, Chase strives to increase diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts and policies in the hospitality, tourism, and event industries. Please join me in welcoming Chase Brunson.
Thank you, Josh. Hello, everyone. I'm going to introduce our panelists next. I'm going to sit down to do that. All right, we'll start with Jason. So Jason Dunn has been a change maker in Cincinnati within the national hospitality industry for almost 2 decades, with a drive to redefine how the industry thinks about multicultural and diversity meetings and their impact on destinations. Since joining the CVB in 2004, Jason has led efforts to deliver significant new convention business and forged inroads with the national multicultural and diverse meetings market. During his tenure, the number of multicultural and diverse meetings in Cincinnati has represented more than 1/3 of all CVB business from 2008 to 2018, with a direct visitor spend of $200 million. Jason brings deep perspective and a successful track record in connecting communities of all backgrounds to Cincinnati. Please welcome Jason. Next up, we have Rory. Rory leads the association sectors and marketing teams at Visit Scotland business events. Since joining Visit Scotland in 2015, Rory has overseen the expansion of the association team and remit within Scotland, introduced industry's first campaigns such as Legends, and more recently, Journey to Change. Rory and his team have driven redefining business events in Scotland as a tool for social sustainability, positive change, and economic transformation, and have integrated this vision into the core of Visit Scotland's marketing strategy for business events. Please welcome Rory. And certainly last but not least, Maria is the Senior Vice President, Convention Divisions at the Philadelphia Convention and Visitors Bureau. She leads the convention sales and service teams in strategy and growing convention bookings, all while positioning Philadelphia as a premier destination for meetings, conventions, and events. Maria has been with the CVB for 22 years, and her work has resulted in award-winning meetings, conventions, and events hosted at the Pennsylvania Convention Center and throughout the city of Philadelphia. In her previous role, Maria was Vice President of Sales and Convention Services with a primary focus on sales strategy and exemplary customer service. One of her signature accomplishments was securing and executing the 2017 NFL Draft. Please welcome Maria. All right, everyone. Well, thank y'all for being here. We really appreciate you choosing this session to come to, and we do want to thank Marriott for being a sponsor of this. And with that, we will just go ahead and get started with our questions. So we're going to throw maybe an easy one at everybody. What would you say is your biggest challenge the destination is facing right now in the DEI landscape? And Maria, we'll start with you.
Biggest challenge? That's a tough one. I mean, I think right now, I think we're positioned very well with our DEI initiative, so I don't think we have any direct challenges around the market segment itself. I think the business right now, DEI groups typically need to come in off-peak months, so finding availability right now is probably the biggest challenge that we're facing.
Awesome. And actually, as a follow-up just for you, we know that people often talk about Philadelphia being a leader in DEI events. Do you feel with that mantra that you have a little bit more pressure to perform when you do have roadblocks, like you run into something and you have to tackle it really quickly, or how does that feel being the
I think
the
because
leader?
we've been at it so long. I mean, we've had a division of DEI for 30 years, right? It was called the Multicultural Affairs Congress when we first started. So I feel like we were trailblazers in this space, and we worked really hard at growing the community, understanding what the needs were. So I feel like we're still very entrenched in the community, so we're lockstep forward with whatever challenges, whatever initiatives together. So there's no surprises. They know when we can't put a particular piece of business in, prime dates, over a major event, right?
Okay.
So we just work together to find what works best.
Great, awesome, thanks. Rory, what do you find that Scotland's biggest DEI roadblocks are right now?
I
Challenges?
think over the years, Scotland's introduced some really good initiatives and, to use your word, trailblaze on some of the things. When the Scottish National Party joined, there was a mandate to make sure there's 50% representation for women on boards in government and encouraging that in the corporate world. We are the first country to introduce LGBTQ history as a mandatory educational element within the Scottish curriculum for all school children. I think some of the challenges, we left the European Union, so that has made it slightly more difficult to attract people from different cultures and different walks of life into the country. But I would say the opportunity going forward is to take the initiatives that we have at a national level and also as a Visit Scotland level and work with people coming into the country to implement them as much as possible. So we want to make sure the country is as open and welcoming as possible, and we want to ensure that that is then translated across to the events, be it business events or sporting events into the country.
Awesome. I think anybody here in the room that is from the U.S. might be surprised that you said that your schools have implemented mandatory LGBT education, because the U.S. is constantly just trying to push it out of the way and not say, we're sitting here with Florida literally saying don't say gay. So that's really interesting and really great for Scotland. Rory?
Yeah, so I think to each of their perspectives, it is the same. We have numerous initiatives happening within the organization in Cincinnati. IHL, Dan Lincoln Institute for Hospitality Leadership, focuses on making sure that brown and black and LGBTQ members are not only limited to in hospitality careers. So we're in high schools, we're in colleges, et cetera. The Vibe Activation Program that we have here in Cincinnati as well makes sure that national, international, and local persons get together, as well as when conventions come into town, to make sure that there's businesses who reflect the demographics are represented in those as well. And I think lastly, opportunities, as we talk about necessarily challenges, are that of which to ensure that people are not feeling that they're going to be replaced. And that is a major issue, not just in Cincinnati, but along in the country. We're talking about it real. We're trying to educate people on the norms, that D&I is not a vehicle that replaces persons, but also a place that we're welcoming folks to be a part of the conversation and kind of expanding the table where everybody has equity and parity. And I think that's really a major focus, a major push. And although D&I has become in vogue in many cities, the struggle is what's real and what isn't, and what's just in style, and what is honest. And I think that's really what people are struggling with now. So if we're being honest in the discussion, I think that's really driving the platform and the new momentum around D&I efforts.
Awesome, that's good to hear. And actually, I'll go right back to you, Jason. When we were prepping for the panel, you mentioned that you're very big on data. Cincinnati is collecting a lot of data when it comes to DEI initiatives. What data are you collecting? How are you collecting it? And then how are you using it once you have it?
Yeah, so the data that we're collecting is, frankly, how much money are we spending within the various communities? What is the visitor actually looking for when they come to a destination? How are they choosing that destination? How are we represented within the actual staff, whether it's CEO, C-suite, or all the way down to or across the span of cooking and cleaning. And so as we look at these scenarios, the task forces that we are getting together within our region are focused on those individual issues. How are we making sure that LGBTQ businesses, African American businesses, Hispanic businesses, Asian American businesses, et cetera, are also getting a piece of the pie? And as we get that information with MMGY Global, we did a study with them, we did a study with UC Economics, who is our local university, and focusing those insights. And then we're taking that data and then we're kind of carving it out into specific areas and stating, well, here's the opportunities for change, here's where we're doing well, here's where we're really struggling, and how do we apply resources to those things. So that is the local piece that we're focused on. And then there's investment from Cincinnati to allow us to be a part of global conversations. So Gary's here, and I'm the co-chair of EIC's Equity Task Force, and Gary's on that committee as well. And we're focusing on how are we looking at different platforms and areas of opportunity to help the entire industry. And so it takes a lot of leadership to focus on that. And then when those data points come out, we'll be able to apply resources to ensure that there's measurable outcomes, not just talk, but measurable outcomes and ways to solve for the problems.
Absolutely, and I think that's something that we hear a lot about is when we're working on DEI initiatives, there is a lot of talk that goes on and then not a whole lot of execution. So we definitely need to be working on that. Rory, do you all collect DEI data when you all hold events? Or?
Absolutely, and it's very similar to the ways that we do it and the reasons why we do it. Very similar to Jason. We are an agency of Scottish Government, which means we do collect a humongous amount of data. Sometimes it can be slightly overwhelming, the data that we do collect. We look at seeing what the workforce is within the hospitality sector in Scotland, and how diverse it is, and where we need to change as an industry to ensure that we have as much representation as possible. We also did some similar surveys and data research on why people choose different destinations, and have rejigged the kind of marketing and the position of our messaging to reflect that, along with the proof points on why we claim X, Y, and Z for why people choose a destination. We have completely flipped. I mean, I hope everybody knows, otherwise I'm not doing my job properly, about kilts, whiskey, bagpipes. That's part of our cultural identity. But we flipped that over the last, say, 6 years. It's been a journey where we now talk about, the positive change that people can have in a country and in the world when they meet face to face, and that all includes DEI, diversity, equality, but also combating things like poverty, universal healthcare, universal education, and we're putting into process, because of that data and because of that research, ideas and plans that when people come over, introducing them to organisations to work with, that they can make that positive change in Scotland and hopefully elsewhere.
Great. Going to go right ahead and say, I'm sure y'all collect data points.
We do, and we use it. We use it in just the same way.
Okay.
It's important that you have that, so it not only shows who's coming to your city and why, as we discussed, but also as we're looking at funding streams and everything around budgeting, it's important that we be able to share that with our internal and external stakeholders as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when we talk about budget, that's a really big thing for a roadblock that people expect to have when we talk about DEI initiatives. People always say, I don't have the budget for it, or I don't have the means to do this. Do you have a portion of your overall budget that is earmarked for DEI initiatives? And if so, I guess how is it affecting your business? And then as a follow-up, where are you finding the ROI on using those? You're finding the data points and you have this budget. What's the ROI on those?
Me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Sorry. We'll just go back and forth.
Yeah, we have a large budget dedicated towards DEI. Our PHL diversity division is a business development division, and it's one of 3 that we have. So we've got a healthy budget, and we're hiring a new executive director. Now, many of you know Greg DeShields was our executive director for years, and he has now started Tourism Diversity Matters and taken what he's done in Philadelphia and what we've created nationwide. So, that budget, it's the whole purpose is to fill our community with the meetings and conventions that we want. It benefits everybody. It not only benefits our LGBTQ plus community, but our hotels, our restaurants, our businesses, our Black and brown businesses. Everybody benefits from it. So I think it's an initiative that, as Jason said, it's not about checking a box, it's diving all in. It's really understanding DEI. It's not something that you've got to integrate it into your workplace, into your meetings, into your staff, into your everything that you do. It should be a commonality, right? It shouldn't be something that you just say, okay, we satisfy that need over here. So, and I think we feel that way in Philadelphia.
Yeah, absolutely. Rory, same question. Do you have a budget, and then how are we measuring ROI when we're spending that money?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. And we also have a small team dedicated to that within Visit Scotland, who a diversity and inclusion manager. However, because of the setup, we also have huge expectations in what we do from Scottish Government, because they directly fund us with taxpayer money. So how we operate, it's all completely transitioned. Even when I first started at Visit Scotland, the focus is now, number one is DEI and sustainability and fighting climate change is our industry's number one, or my organisation's number one mission. We also work with a lot of external partners because it's an ever-changing landscape. By no means are the 700 people who work for Visit Scotland experts in this. So we reach out to such as LGBT MPA, EIC, and also local organisations and innovation centres within Scotland to ensure that we're as educated and up to date as possible. Measurement is tricky because we don't do DEI for economic benefit. We're members of the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, which is an idea that economies should transition to be people and planet first rather than purely growth. And that's the mentality we take with DEI, in that we want people to be happy and we want people to feel safe, and that's the number one priority for doing so. The measurement we're looking at is the stories that we tell of what the effects are. For example, 2018, Glasgow hosted the World Down Syndrome Congress. One of the initiatives that was taken on with that was to educate taxi drivers, retailers, hoteliers, restaurateurs, to make sure that they were making people who had Down syndrome as welcome into the city as possible. And that's a legacy that has continued from that event for various different events that take place in Scotland. And that's the stories that we tell our ministers in government, that's the stories we tell our funders. It's not about economic growth, it's about doing the right thing.
Wow, yeah, that's really great to hear, and I love that you mentioned the World Down Syndrome Congress, because I think when we focus on DEI, a lot of times we're very we're like blinders on, where we're thinking, it's just LGBT, it's just race, it's just culture, and there's so much more to the DEI landscape, and we have to take small steps, but we can focus on
absolutely, and I think learning from each other is also really important, which is why I'm so happy to be in this panel, because none of us are experts, and if we want to have equality for all, we all have to work together to achieve that. So I was in Rotterdam last year, where they kindly invited us over to have a discussion, share knowledge, share experiences, and some of what I learned in Rotterdam has now been implemented at Visit Scotland, so thank you.
And Jason?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple different ways that we look at it. One, let me just say, yes, D&I is the right thing to do. D&I is a way or a strategy to ensure that your destination is competitive based off the demographics that are changing, and frankly, retaining your employees and making sure quality of life for your entire city or destination is at the top of the conversation. But the reality of it is that yes, there is a business case to this, and as the numbers come in, as I stated, if a city has not invested, if a destination or region is not fully focused on ensuring that D&I efforts are top, then you won't compete, whether it's in conventions, whether it's in retaining talent, whether it's just saying that to corporations that you are ready to be a progressive metropolis. And so I think from our perspective, how we rate or the ROI it is conventions are driven, because you have to have an investment as tax dollars. So you have to figure out where the money is going. It has to make sense. It's across the board. Absolutely. Number two, we have a total separate department that focuses just on strategy, whether it's marketing, similar to PHL, who started the whole conversation about it. But that also cross pollinates through the areas within the Bureau. So each department has a spin that has to happen within the minority community or D&I space, and then the Bureau as a whole has metrics that has to be met as well. And so even when we were bidding on contracts, there is a component of D&I to make sure that there are people who are able to compete, who may not necessarily have the means, but they have the opportunity and the abilities, but may not have opportunities for the contracts. So all those things are part of the entire effort. It's not just solely focused on the ROI of business, but that is a real part of the conversation, because we're paying tax dollars within the CVBs, so you have to show an investment in an ROI to do that. So I think we all have to kind of set the discussion on, yes, there is a business case to this. 2, it is morale. 3, it's competition. And 3, how do you retain your employees to ensure they are part of the conversation?
Yeah, awesome. I'm glad that everybody has spoken about ROI in terms of we are talking about budget. We have this earmarked money that has to go here, and we have to show our supporters here where that's going. But it also, when we talk about DEI, it's mainly about people. Like that's where we're connecting folks at. And as a planner, I tell people that all the time. It is great to see my events have more people in them, but I want to see more diverse audience, because what we've learned over when we're talking about whether it's in our industry or another industry, DE&I is very important, and when we're overall focused on it, our profits go up no matter what. And so we're sitting here, we're focusing on people, and that's the root of our business is people.
And Ronnie and Gary are in the audience, and Dave, so they'll shut me up if I talk too much. But I do believe, again, I'm a different kind of tourism guy. I don't come from the hotels. I come from the mayor's office that lobbied on boycotting and all kinds of things with the city. I'm an advocate for tourism. And so when I hear you say that is refreshing, because you have to, not you, but in general, associations have to understand you have the power. So when you are picking destinations, you are essentially empowering those people whom represent your organization locally, regionally, and statewide, and on an international, national level. So when you pick a destination, whether you're advocating, irritating, motivating, or engaging based off your mission, you actually are empowering that city to say, look, I made the right decision. Or two, you're challenging that city or destination to make the right decision by empowering your local folks to stand up on behalf of your mission. So I applaud you for thinking that way, because many destinations don't. I mean, many associations don't. They only go in, sign contracts, they have the meeting within the four walls of the hotel, the center, and then they go home. They don't have the impact in leveraging their economic power to make change. So I applaud you on that effort.
Well, I appreciate that. We talk about it right now, and especially in our whole industry. I think what many of us don't realize is how much our dollars matter. Like, we're the hospitality industry, we bring a ton of economic benefit to any cities that we're in, any country that we're in. And so when these, not so much for Scotland, but in the United States, when these states keep attacking, some of our marginalized communities, planners, unfortunately suppliers don't really, but planners have a really big hand in choosing where we go. And so when you're sitting there and you move your $1 million meeting I'm from Texas, you move it from Texas into California, you're showing our legislators that this matters. Like, what you're doing at a ground level matters, and if you're not going to support our people, then we'll go somewhere else that will. So I think it's really important for planners and suppliers to keep in mind. I understand that you can't pick your hotel up and move it somewhere, so that's very unfortunate. But planners can definitely make those choices. But I think that's a really great segue for an audience question. What advice do you have for destinations that might be dealing with negative PRs? Like I said, I'm from Texas, and we have a ton of negative PR because of what our government is doing. So for the folks that are in these cities, destinations in general, how can they help? And then, planners and suppliers in these cities, how can they work with destinations that are a little bit more inclusive, even though they're not in an inclusive area?
Yeah, it's difficult on so many levels, and it's hard to watch and it's hard to see. I think, a lot of the CVBs are funded in some way through city or state funding. So I know there's some delicacies there. But I think the hospitality in Philadelphia, we're 75,000 people strong. So we have a voice. And just what you said, when you pick up and you leave a city because something's not right, that speaks volumes. And so we have to take that message and share it we start on the city council level and try to affect change there, and then we have to work with them to try to affect change on the state level. But it takes an army, and it's not always easy, but we need the industry to stand up as a whole, in every city.
Right, absolutely.
And speak.
I think I completely agree with Maria, and our industry in Scotland is one of the biggest employers in the nation, so it's getting the industry behind you on what the different causes and to try and combat that negative PR that's coming out of it, encouraging the conversations to take place within the events that maybe you host yourself or the events that are coming into the country, because when you bring thousands of people from whatever sector it might be, if you welcome that conversation on stage, then at least it's showcasing that you're not completely shutting down and not listening, but you're encouraging that conversation in the hope that change will happen going forward. But yeah, the industry is powerful. It's a huge employer.
Absolutely.
And therefore it's galvanizing that industry behind these causes to try and make that change at a city level, mayor level, national level.
Yeah.
Easier said than done, though.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
I think it's partnership. Again, none of us up here, and forgive me, liberty to speak on behalf of all of us, none of our cities are perfect. And I believe that in community-based selling, meaning that a bureau is only as powerful as its community that it represents. And if we're not engaged from a grassroots level to the municipalities, all the way to the state government, all the way to the federal level, then there's not a lot of change that we can make. And that may be an unorthodox way of looking at it, but again, empowering your local organizations, your local chambers, your local churches, your local municipalities, whether they agree or disagree, at the end of the day, you have to empower the folk who represent you. And I solely believe in that. And I think that is the only way to sustain that, and the only way to deal with negative publicity is you have to do the right thing by the people who represent you, who you represent, and begin to have discussions like this in your local destinations or your local cities or within your partners. Heighten the discussions that are controversial. You're not picking a side, you're just having a conversation. And hopefully when that discussion happens, you're pulling out points that level set what you believe, what you represent, and the goals that you're trying to achieve. And I mean, that's really all you can do based off, like I said, what we said, that, we are oftentimes funded by politicians, and this political landscape is a little difficult right now. So all you can do is represent the community and heighten the conversations and bring to light what those subjects are that may cause tension. But at the same point, you're driving change by bringing and educating folks on what the truth is.
Amazing. Well, we've got about 15 minutes before the session is done, so I'd love to turn it to the audience in the room. Do we have any questions that anybody wants to ask our panelists sitting here in the room? I can see the folks online, but anybody have anything that they want to ask us directly? Or you can raise your hand. We have a mic we pass around. No? All right, well, I'll just keep asking questions then. Awesome. But real quick, as a follow-up to that question, yeah, I think, like I said, I really think that we don't realize, or some of us maybe don't realize how powerful our spending dollars are. For me personally, back in 2016, everyone might remember the bathroom bills that were coming through. That was like the big talk of 2016. Now it's the transgender sports ban and stuff like that. But the hospitality industry was instrumental in stopping those bills from moving across the nation. So it passed North Carolina first, and within 6 months, North Carolina recorded, I think it was roughly around $3 million in lost tourism immediately. The Greensboro Coliseum lost the NCAA championship. A lot of stuff went down, and so other states took a look at that and said, oh my gosh, like we can't afford to lose $3 million per convention center. That's insane. For instance, in Texas, like MPI and the Lodging Association, everything else came together and wrote this really well thought out letter to our legislators and said, they basically broke it down by data points. They said, here's how much money you're standing to lose if you pass this bill. And that bill died on the floor in Texas because our legislators realized, hey, we can't be doing that. Unfortunately, we're not seeing the same thing happen in 2020. We've tried to band together a little bit and stop some of these, the sports bills for the transgender individuals that are running around, some of the voting rights bills as well. And I think to our points about we all have to band together. It's not going to take the destination, it's not going to take the planner, it's not going to take the supplier. It's going to take all of us as a whole hospitality army across everything that's being attacked to really stand up. So if you have that voice and you're able to use it and you're able to influence change in your city or in your place of business, I really encourage you to do so. So we focus a little bit on our cities and how we can deal with negative PR. How can our planners help our destinations in making their cities more inclusive? So when a planner comes to you, how can they work with you to make it a little bit more inclusive? And Rory, we'll start with you. We haven't started with you yet, so we'll go.
I think when we have events coming from all around the world, there's something that we learn from everybody, and it's ensuring that those conversations are freely able to happen. For Visit Scotland, a lot of the planners will deal directly with our cities like Glasgow, Aberdeen, Edinburgh, but we need to make sure that we're involved in that conversation because there's a lot that we can hopefully help with from a national level by involving government, involving ministers and different topics that might be taking place throughout the day. I'd also say working with academic institutions, innovation centres, research centres, pro-social companies, social enterprises, charities. It's all about involving the community as much as possible in the destination that you're in, and that can help the event be as inclusive as possible by bringing in some of that expertise, addressing some of the challenges that might still be, as Jason said, we're not perfect in Scotland at all, and there's still things that we need to get right, and there's still things we need to work on. And if we can get some international expertise, international knowledge, find out how things have been combated elsewhere, and then work with our local institutions to see how we can push this up government level, then that's how we can make these events as inclusive as possible. We can educate them on the local diversity of the local communities to ensure that we're doing as much as we can PR-wise to make this event known to everybody.
Okay, cool. Jason?
I think the direct thing or low-hanging fruit is when in your RFPs ask directly what your spend is, what your representation of your staff is, what are your D&I efforts. I mean, that's low-hanging fruit. I think the second piece is support organizations like the LGBT Meeting Professionals Association. And I think once you begin to support those suppliers or destinations who support orgs like this, then you empower this organization to actually speak on your behalf. And the destinations that want and are intentional about partnering with this organization, you know they have your best interest in mind. I think lastly, irritate, advocate, motivate, and engage. When you come into a destination, if there's an issue that's at hand that affects your organization, make that a part of your curriculum or organizational sessions, and then bring and inspire folks to learn about what your organization does, why it was created, and what the objectives are as you focus. Or the opposite is based upon what your desires are, how bold you want to be, and what the stance is that you want to take. I mean, those are 4 quick points that I can think about, but you can write and talk afterwards if you want.
Maria?
I would just add, I agree with both panelists. I would add, just get a seat at the table, whether it's city government, Office of LGBTQ Affairs, which we have one in Philadelphia, and most CVBs and DMOs in the US have customer advisory boards. So get involved, ask to be on the board. If they haven't asked you, ask, I'm interested. I think you'd be surprised at how quickly you can get a seat at a table and the value that you could bring. And then, you're surrounded by 20 other people in different associations and how you can maybe affect change just from what you're learning and what they're hearing from you. So I definitely would encourage you to ask to get on a board, ask to get involved.
That's great advice. Yeah, I think a lot of people haven't considered that. That's really, really good advice. Okay, well, I'm going to open it back up.
I want to dive deeper into that conversation we had about influencing change to destinations. So, I'm Gary, and I know those of you don't.
Everybody knows Gary.
I work for Teneo, which represents hotels in many destinations, including yours. And it's the unintended consequences when you influence change to not go to specific destinations, because you do affect the communities that need it the most. So I heard you start to talk about it, but I would love to hear, and I think some of the destinations who are not always welcoming and have these laws, when you start to influence change, yes, you can quantify it, but when you choose to not go to destinations, that has unintended consequences for those who need it the most, that are working to make that change happen. So I know, Chase, you mentioned that, but I would be interested to see from your perspective, as well as the supplier's perspective, what happens when you don't go into those destinations. Because planners can choose to go to those destinations that are welcoming, but then it affects those. How about going into a destination that has issues so that you can make change happen by going? So I'd like you all to kind of dive a little deeper into that.
Yeah, do you want to hear from me or just the panelists? Or? Doesn't matter. I'll start. So for me as a planner and also as a trans man, sometimes picking certain destinations, even if I want to go into them, is not necessarily about, you're right, like we definitely underserve some communities when we choose not to, but especially for the LGBT community, it can actually be dangerous to not choose an area that is safe and welcoming. So the example I always use, I moved away from Texas, actually. I graduated college and I got out immediately because Texas is so unfriendly for folks like me. I moved up to Portland, Oregon, so the complete opposite. And I came back during COVID because things happen. And something that people don't realize is on the books in Texas is there's actually a law that if I require medical care, I'm post-op, that means I've had a double mastectomy. If an EMT comes into me and he cuts my shirt open and he sees my scars, he's legally allowed to let me die there. It's not, they don't have to serve me if they don't want to. And so for me as a planner, it's thinking about keeping these things in mind. I have a due diligence to protect my attendees first and foremost. And so that's what I'm focused on. So if I'm going to go into somewhere in Texas and have a meeting, I want to make sure that it is as much as possible in a friendly area. So, that's avoiding, a little bit more conservative side. So like I live in Austin. So Austin's probably the best place for me in Texas. I'd hold my meetings in Austin because I'm more protected there. There's a better chance that people who treat me or whatever there are going to be more understanding. And so I can only speak from the LGBT perspective as far as the dangers go. But that's what I really warn people about is it is great to go into these destinations that do need help, but sometimes there are roadblocks that we just can't fix right now. And I, as a planner, my first and foremost thought is how to make my attendees feel safe in coming. Do you have anything to say?
I mean, as a destination that's very welcoming to the LGBT plus community, I don't know if I can speak to that. I just think if I was on the planner side and I really wanted to go to a destination that I didn't feel was safe and welcoming, I would probably try to work with them to figure out a way to help them by using my voice to like get on their board, like I said, to be an advocate, try to help them understand what the community needs. I think, Philadelphia overnight didn't become one of the, friendliest gay neighborhoods, right? And we're the oldest gay neighborhood in the nation, I think. And we took we thought we were taking a very bold step, and we put the gay neighborhood on our tourism map. And I guess I don't know if we thought it was so bold, but when we put it out there, everybody told us how bold that was. And we were like, oh, well, we have signs and rainbow signs and 6 blocks of gay neighborhood, and we know people want to be there. So just even something like that, right? Just, I don't know. I just think if you want to go to a destination and you don't feel that they're gay friendly, there are ways to help them get there without bringing the meeting first, right? Because safety has to be paramount, right? But I just think using your voice, trying to help them affect change, and they need help, right? There's cities out there that aren't nearly as advanced as us up here on the stage, or nowhere near. So you got to use your voice.
I think I'd probably need to approach this as a delegate, since we don't organise international meetings. For me personally, and also our company is kind of moving in this direction, we're happy to go to a destination to attend a conference or an industry event where, even though the ethics and the morals don't reflect that of my own country, the conversation can still be had, and the conversation can still be debated on stage, open and freely. I will not go to a destination where, as a gay man, where it's illegal to be LGBT, particularly when there's destinations in the death sentences and things where that conversation cannot take place, will not take place, and will never take place because of the regimes that are in there. So I think that's a personal choice, but our company is now looking at where we send our people to represent Scotland and where we spend public money. If we do research now in every venue and every hotel to make sure that we do not get called out for being hypocrites for what we practice and preach in Scotland with public money, and ensuring that it goes to the right places. So absolutely happy to go where we can educate, but I will not go where I cannot.
Right, absolutely.
I think, to Gary's point, this is a hard discussion for many people, and I think what's really at the question is, why was the organization created? And if the organization was created because there was an issue, and you're going to a destination that, to your words are very important, that are trying and that want to, but it may be a larger umbrella that is saying no, then to each of your points, that is a personal decision at the safety and at the helm of the planner and the board that represents or makes a decision. All I was trying to state was, if there is a organization that is empowering their local persons, their state people or regional persons, and there is a question that contradicts the mission as to why they were created, then that organization has a responsibility to make a conscious decision on whether or not you're going to go to a destination and highlight or bring to life whatever the issues are, to make it use as a platform, and then base your curriculum or sessions off that. Or you've tried that, and then it's a matter of safety and making a stance to make change. And so that is solely based on the organization's platform, why they were created, and the mission of which they're trying to accomplish with people who represent them.
Oh, awesome.
I think Larry had a question. Larry.
Hi, Larry Sigg, President and CEO of Atlantic City's DMO. Hi, Maria. Good to see you. I have a question with regard to budgeting and marketing strategies, and for any of the panelists, but specifically for Maria, because I know how robust of the DEI program that they have there. So when you're preparing your DEI budget and the strategies, are you pushing a global message out, or are you targeting message? Because, DEI covers such a wide variety of communities, not one message speaks to all. And if you are, how are you allocating or carving that budget out for each of those segments?
Yeah, I don't think we've done so globally. I think more domestic has been our focus. Our global efforts are mostly around tourism, and not so much meetings and conventions, more individual tourists.
Yeah, maybe I shouldn't use the word global. Maybe it's more of a one message for everyone. That's what I'm really saying.
Yeah.
Or are you creating specific messages for those market segments?
Both.
Both.
I think we have a big welcome. We welcome you to our city. Think of Philadelphia and freedom and liberty and the expression to be whoever you want to be. That's our city. So that's like our big message. But if you look at on our website, our DEI initiatives, they're broken down by segment. So it's a little bit more specific, because I think we have many things to offer for many different groups, so we highlight what that is and what that would mean for you.
Great, thank you.
Awesome. Do you have anything to add to that question, or?
Yeah. She's right. It's both. There are segmented strategies and campaigns to various demographics, and there is one whole one as well from a kind of 30,000 foot level. But answer is yes. It's the culture. I think you can't. It's not a one-way approach. You have to speak to different people in different ways to show that you're really focused on, intentional about getting them to your destination. So the answer is both.
Great, awesome. Do you have you talk about globalization, like you're a country. Do y'all message out globally, or?
Talking to me
for Rory?
We predominantly focus on global.
Okay.
That's kind of our mission in life at Visit Scotland, is to be international. We have like the mothership campaign that we run for marketing, and then we do partnership content with various organisations around Scotland to create individual stories for individual segments. We're government, we have no money, so we do partnership content where we can keep our budgets as low as possible.
Awesome.
But yeah, very similar to these guys.
I'm still stuck on that he has 700 people at Visit Scotland. Did anyone else hear that number?
I heard that.
I got stuck on 700
I took my
a long time
glasses
ago.
off.
And
I was like,
haven't been-
Yeah,
wow.
I heard that. I heard that.
But our team is only 11 for business events, the rest is all tourism.
Awesome, cool. Well, unfortunately, folks, we are out of time. I myself will stay here if you have any further questions. I don't know if our panelists are moving on to other rooms, but I'll be up here if you have further questions that you want to ask any of us, and we'll be happy to address those. Once again, thanks for coming. You're here for important conversations, and it means, I think, a lot to those that are in marginalized communities that you're sitting here in this room, because like I said, we do have a lot of influence being in the industry that we're in. And thanks to LGBT and PA for putting this on. We appreciate it. So.